Hi, I'm going to do a video here playing and learning about studying some yellows, and in particular I'm going to be studying all Daniel Smith colors here. A Hansa Yellow Light, which is a lemony yellow, Hansa Yellow Medium, which is a straight up yellow, and Hansa Yellow Deep, which leans towards orange, so an orangey yellow. So we got sort of the whole spectrum from lemony yellow to straight yellow to an orangey yellow. So I'm going to play with that and these, and maybe play with this little impromptu composition flower plant organic fire shape thing. So I'm going to start off each of these with just a really watery mix. I'm going to end up adding other colors in a separate video. But in watercolors, it's always easier to get darker than it is to get lighter. So it often pays off to start light. It gets confusing because it dries much lighter than it looks when it's wet. So there's all sorts of fun challenges, but it's worth it. This brush, I am really liking these. Da Vinci Casaneo. Pretty recent brush, and synthetic, and really does feel a lot like the Kolinsky Sables natural hair brushes. Anyways, for here I'm just going to drop in some color, some paint in this upper left hand corner. I call that the blob. I just want to introduce some paint, and then I go back and get another load, paint across the top, and I'm going to keep doing that down this shape. I'm overlapping the previous stroke, and as you can see, I have this color, this watery color, pooling at the bottom, at the lower part of the shape, because I'm tipping my board, because I want it to be cascading down like that. I'm going to come over here and kind of get that side, but I can keep plopping in color up here. In fact, it's good to come back and plop in some up here. It's good to get used to doing that. It's not so critical with a smaller shape like this, but once they start getting bigger and sort of drying unevenly, that can be really helpful. I just grabbed some paint there that was a little more concentrated, but this is all still very light. I'm going to make a thirsty brush, get the color out of there. Actually, no, I'm not. I'm going to re-quench. I didn't really finish that shape before doing my thirsty brush. There was probably plenty of paint and color here to just bring my brush in and do it, but I encourage you to sort of just practice this basic technique. So after I get a thirsty brush in, I want to pick up this excess watery color that's pooling down here at the bottom of the shape now. I'm going to get all the paint and stuff out of my brush. I'm going to come back and tip it more like a pencil and try to just really gently run it across the bottom. I don't even have to touch the paper. I could just soak it up by touching the watery paint, just like soaking up water like a sponge. Anyways, that's a first shape. Let me now go to the next one. So when I'm grabbing a little bit of color, trying to mix up some the color that I want to use, I get some water in my brush. I make sure my brush is clean and that my water is definitely clean enough. And then I will sort of touch a little bit of the paint concentrate, as I like to sort of call it, and get a very watery pool of this color going now. So I will now come and do a very similar thing that I just did. Introduce some color up there. Go back and get some more. Making sure that there's plenty of water and paint so that it's flowing down. This is a really tricky thing for me to learn at the beginning, because usually you start off with really inexpensive synthetic brushes that really don't hold enough water and paint to introduce as much watery color as you need to on any given shape to really get it cascading down like that. It's probably hard to see with this lighter color. So that was that one. Thirsty brush again. Come across the bottom, spaz out. And this is 300, by the way, this is 300 pound. It's the Fluid 100 paper. I have been having a few challenges with this paper, but I'm still going with it for right now. Let's see, now I will come over and rinse that color out of my brush, and got a little bit of clean water, and I'll just start touching it to that blob, that pile there. And it's a good example of, it's easy to grab paint and you got it in a way that it's sort of hard to see if it's all mixed. So if you're left with sort of an unmixed blob of paint in your brush, that will create a non-smooth blend, a non-smooth wash. So now this is my Hansa Yellow Deep. Hopefully I wasn't off camera right there, but let's see. There's some of that. I'm going to go back and get some more. You see how I lift up as I start getting closer to this edge, because I want to try to be somewhat accurate, but it's just a little study, so try not to get too obsessive about staying in the lines. That's as much for me as it is for you. So it looked kind of dark there at the beginning, didn't it? But as I keep going down, there's plenty of paint in my brush and on the paper that I can just keep overlapping. So that's that shape, that row. Tell you what, I think what I'll do is maybe just paint a couple shapes over over here with some. I'll start with some, in a similar way, just some really watery Hansa Yellow Light. Make sure it's good and mixed up. I think I'll just sort of paint one of these shapes here. That was a fun sort of brush thing. It's fun to, I don't talk a lot about brush technique, but it is good to sort of play with changing the width of the stroke with different pressures. I more often am just sort of concerned with painting a certain shape. With as few strokes as possible, but not like a lot of folks who are very much into just minimalist strokes, and it's a beautiful way of painting as well. And I'll do this shape too, and this is sort of a good example of a lot of times in watercolor you're combining shapes at the beginning when you're painting in light, watery washes of things, and then build up from there. So the same idea, I'm just making sure I get some paint introduced to that area. I'm tipping the paper as well. And it's still all pretty wet around here, so I can come back and adjust. But that's kind of a good way to start off thinking about some of these things. Perhaps I'll do that one too. So I'm starting with the lightest and sort of the coolest temperature-wise. As soon as I said that, then I feel like playing with a little bit of the medium as well, the Hansa Yellow medium. And at this watery stage, it's really not going to be so different. But it's always fascinating how things add up in different subtle ways. There's some pooling color in some of these spots. I'm going to let that be. It might blossom back up a little bit, which would be fine with me. Maybe this last one, I actually had a little bit of the medium and a little bit of the deep. So it's going to be a very little bit. Let me try a little more than that. So sort of a yellow in between the medium and the deep, but still watery. If I came back this big sort of, well, maybe you wouldn't, maybe you wouldn't. Maybe this is wet enough. I was trying to point out that you shouldn't come back into this shape because it's probably drying. And then I effectively came back into that shape, and look, it blended just fine. So that tells me that these shapes are still wet enough to accept similar kind of concentration of color. So I'm gonna see what happens. I'm gonna do a little what if and just take a chance. If I drop in a little bit of this mix. A lot of times when I drop in color, I have this like trying to almost flick the paint out of the brush and then barely touching the paper and then kind of lifting back up again. So I've sort of just noticed that by watching these videos. Now I know it's getting pretty dry up here, so if oh heck. So if I do bring in some watery paint that's more watery than the shape underneath it that I'm painting it on, that is going to create some backgrounds. It's not doing as bad as I was thinking it might be, but that will make it so it's not as smooth of a blend. All of this color has been sort of shifting around with all the water. Okay, great. It looks all perfect. But I'm curious what it's going to be like when it dries. So I think I will let it dry and come back and do some more later.